There we go. And here we are with session 9 of the task-based language teaching group here. And we have an extra session on assessment today. And welcome here for the core group. And, I'm going to be honest here. I've got, kind of 3 or 4 things in the back of my head, but I think we should just kind of do it off the cuff here.
Me too.
And because there's only 6 of us, we can do it that way nice and easily. And start out with just any kind of impressions at all of the chapter. Did it leave you feeling good and excited and interested, or a little bit kind of
testing never makes me feel good.
I know, yeah, that's true. That's true.
Something I want to do.
I wrote in the forums, has anyone seen or used that Hawaii assessment project materials?
I did a long time ago, about 15 years ago. I had the book. I don't have it anymore. I don't know where it went. Went back to my office and tried to find it. I ordered it again, but it won't arrive for a couple more weeks. But it was a good resource of lots of different tests for, And I never realized that it was task-based. It was just, I thought it was communicative information gap tests. And so I didn't hook up the lingo to the,
I might just wonder, because it was published in like 98, and that it doesn't seem like there has been as much. I mean, they mentioned the Cambridge test, but kind of why there hasn't been more materials published, more recent materials.
Well, everyone's trying to put it online, so everyone wants to hold on to their stuff until they can monetize it seems. That's what I think a lot of it is.
Yeah.
testing. Yeah. Do you think it was kind of, pulled away by Pearson and Cambridge and Oxford and things like that? They don't seem to be really doing any kind of task-based testing.
No, they're not, though. Everything's sort of monetized. So it's like everyone's afraid to do something because they think it's probably going to get stolen. I mean, you put a lot of work into it and then all of a sudden you find it, it's online somewhere. I don't know. Maybe I'm just being depressing this week.
You don't sound that at all. No. Yeah, I kind of, hi, Andrea. I didn't have a lot of time for the chapter, and I kind of scanned through most of it, but you all remember Marcos Benavides, who's still working hard. We talk to him each week, and he's still working hard trying to catch up and do it. He just can't do it right now. But he showed us a model that showed me a model a long time ago. And Kevin, that didn't come up here, did it? Did it come up here a couple of weeks ago or not? His model of assessment.
No.
Is basically, so he's actually created his own, it's a one sheet. And it's basically asks if you've, if the task was to buy an airplane ticket on the phone, and if you end up with an airplane ticket, you've passed the test and you get a 6 out of 10. That's the beginning. A pass is a 6. And then depending on how eloquently or elegantly or whatever you did it, your points go up to 10 out of 10. And he's got sort of a mini rubric and different considerations. And boy, that makes me feel really satisfied, and then I just, oh my God, they're really going deep and wide and kind of overboard on a lot of these considerations. I mean, I certainly there's inter-rater reliability problems. Who knows if Catherine or Beestra or I are gonna, assess the same way, but I found it like, again, it's the teacher side in me just feeling it a little bit overkill in general. How's that for depressing, Joe?
Good job. Good job.
Yeah. Go, Bistra.
Yeah, I mean, this chapter made me feel at the same time encouraged and depressed because I was just beginning to grasp what task-based learning and teaching is, and then all of a sudden there's testing, and I'm like, this cannot be tested. You can test the language because Cambridge has already come up with a really detailed criteria when it comes to language production. But how do you assess the task? And as Stephen said, if it's done, it's done. Okay, it's a pass. But how well you do it, I mean, who decides the criteria for the task? That's the problem.
Mm.
So it just left me wondering what I can do practically in my classroom to assess tasks. And should I assess tasks is the other thing.
The other
I mean,
thing, Bistra, do you have other teachers in your organization? No. So
no, it's just me, myself, and I for the moment.
so, yeah. So as long as you're not schizophrenic, then you should be fine, right? You're
Yeah,
going to be
absolutely.
consistent. Yeah. Yeah.
Also, because a lot of the people who have one-on-one classes, they look for something specific. Most of them just want to improve their speaking skills, and they just don't care about testing. They don't want to be tested. They don't want to sit exams. So I'm wondering if I should actually do any kind of testing. If they're happy, if they feel like they're progressing, if they can do the job, if they're becoming more fluent, more accurate, I mean, why would I bother to test them? To prove what? I don't know.
I agree.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say that's, yeah, optimistic and depressing all at once. Well done.
That's schizophrenic.
My experience in call, with doing software and assessment in online or with computer-based programs has, really taught me the fact that testing really doesn't work very well. That if you can get rid of testing by constantly monitoring everything they do at all times, then you don't need to test. And yeah, exactly. And so, in a way, TBLT testing here is not testing. I read an article earlier today that was saying scaffolding and TBL
Corrective
assessment,
feedback.
yeah, is exactly the same thing. And I go, that's crazy. That's really, and then I started thinking, well, maybe it is, and that you can't, make a, kind of, well, a certain kind of test probably wouldn't work very well. Proficiency test, for example, wouldn't work very well with TBL assessment, but some other types it would. But again, you can negate the need for testing by just constantly monitoring the students and giving them feedback. Except for the thing that you have to have number sometimes to be able to show for programs and
To parents, to have proof to show to parents.
For me, it's a test. I do a lot of tasks in class, and then the final test is a task. But I've always felt like you do this kind of pass-fail test just to kind of set the students, and then you give them the grade from pass to, perfect, according to how hard you've seen them work. So I try to separate those two. So Marcos kind of does it like, okay, you do X and then I'll start grading you, which is similar. But usually the task, I try to avoid using the final exam for any kind of evaluation other than pass fail. So I think you're always going to have problems if you start saying, okay, we have to evaluate every task that we do, and I've got to give you points for every task and all this other stuff. I'm pretty sure the students don't realize what the points mean.
But I don't think, points, feedback again, assessment feedback? Where is the difference there? And do I want to, if I could, I would constantly give every student feedback all the time. That would be,
Yeah.
yeah.
And that is a sort of like an achievement test you do with them, because they know, based on what you've studied so far, how well you can do things and what you need to improve. So that is a sort of testing for me.
You ready to hear from Andrea? She got her little yellow hand up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Hi. I have to keep my camera off because the connection is really bad. I'm not at home right now. About testing, if we will look at it in isolation, it doesn't make much sense. But if you do needs analysis, course design, testing, then it makes sense. So if you tie the course content to the course objectives, to the needs analysis, then it's pretty easy to come up with the task-based assessment. For example, I had an in-company course where the main focus was on giving presentations. We agreed on the criteria. We had the criteria. We built towards the main goal, the entire course. Then at the end, they had to prepare a presentation. They had the evaluation criteria. We did 360 degrees assessment. They self-assessed. They got assessment from their peers. They got assessment from me. They had two categories: language and task performance. And also reflection sheet: what went well, what went wrong, what I would change. So at the end, they did get kind of a grade, but it was the average of their own grade, self-assessment plus peer assessment plus my assessment. And I think it went really well. It was one of the most successful courses, and in long-term effects, we could see the ROI in the long term. So it is possible if it's integrated, in the course, not seen in isolation. Let's do an ABCD test, multiple choice or gap fill.
Mhm.
Doesn't that sound it sounds like the perfect word, using integrated? That just seemed to nail it. Yeah.
Mhm.
Or for example, we had in a call center, and there were people that had problems with the pronunciation, and they were unintelligible. Well, pronunciation was improved pronunciation. Level B2 descriptor CFR was one of the course main goals, and they had to, that was an assessment criterion in the final test, let's call it. Some formative assessment as well, because we have a pretty complicated formative assessment system that kind of affects the final grade and whether you get or not a certificate. But when you do the course, okay, these are the tasks. This is the needs analysis, course objectives, course outcomes, breakdown of tasks, and then assessment criteria, and then assessment, form of assessment. And it makes sense like that. Otherwise, I don't know, A, B, C, D at the end, and write a composition about the impact of music on your soul. It doesn't really make sense.
That sounds a lot. It sounds better than what I do, and it sounds almost perfect. The only thing I could add that would make it even more perfect would be co-construction of the test, so that you sit down with the students and say, okay, how do we build this test together? Right.
Have you ever done that, Kevin? It's
Yes,
how realistic is it?
Well, it takes a long time.
Yeah.
Right. Not very. And you need to, how do you say, model maybe a couple of tests before that, and then they get the idea. Yeah.
Mm. Do you think that has any kind of good after effect in terms of any kind of life skill or
Motivation mostly?
Is it?
Yeah.
Well, if it's tied up with the needs analysis, it's kind of co-constructed, because they say what they need at school, at work, wherever whichever the context they are. I also had teenagers who were preparing for debate clubs, and I knew nothing about the debate. They told me about the criteria. They told me how it should be done. They showed me what perfect would look like.
Wow.
And that I had no idea. It was the world school format. I had to read a 300-page course book on how to run the world, this format. It's a special debate format. And we had the expert who was a girl who had been doing this for a long time. She gave feedback. I just facilitated the meeting. She was like the teacher. She gave the feedback, the grades, and then we all did it collectively. So I think the assessing tasks is not difficult. I think, nailing the needs, nailing the course objectives at the very beginning and course outcomes. That's the tricky part. It's the needs assessment, what they say they need, what they think they need, plus what they really need and they don't know they need, and kind of balance it. And then assess task performance, assess language, whatever, language, and the CFR serves. I think the new descriptors from the CFR, the companion, came out, I think 2 years ago. That's perfect. I mean, you don't need more. They do anything from mediation to intercultural communication to turn taking, pronunciation, I don't know, even sign language. It's complete. I think it's a wonderful tool, no matter what other people might say. It's the best we've got right now.
Agree. Andrea, I have a question. In terms of numerics, do you use the Cambridge scales, or how do you do it? I mean,
the CFR. I use the CFR.
Okay.
I assess for 3
language
exams.
Okay, that's
The
for
CFR
assessing
also,
the language.
Yes, but it's not just the language. The new descriptors have so they also refer to other areas, not just pronunciation, grammar, accuracy, whatever. They have descriptors for meetings, for teleconferencing, for writing emails, for creative writing, for everything.
They're
And
really
then
detailed.
and then you can add your own. Wherever something's missing, you have the internal criteria. Like in companies, that's fairly easy. It depends on the company culture and what they're taught internally. With schools, school students, we decide on the criteria together, or we take the world school format, or you adapt them on the go. And where something is missing or debatable, we just add new. And it's not complicated. I know it sounds complicated, but it's not, because okay, this is what we want to be able to do by the end of the class. This is perfect. This is grade 8, 10, right? And it's not, at the end, it's not the grade, it's the effort. It's like how much you've improved, because usually we do it gradually. We break down the task into smaller tasks, pedagogical tasks, and the tasks become more complicated until you have the final presentation, the final debate, the final negotiation, the final whatever. But I don't know. And at lower levels, I imagine it works just as well. I mean, if you gave them a task, you have the budget and you have to go to the market and take the ingredients for this particular recipe, you'll know if they've done it. If they don't manage their money well, task performance goes down. You had this amount of money, you did the math wrong in English or German. So
I'm curious on from anyone else about this whole needs analysis. In Japan, is it the case that students don't think that way very well? They're so my parents studied English and my grandmother studied English, and nobody ever learned any English, so there's not really any expectation. And therefore, without those expectations, there's not much of an understanding of the various factors that would make they kind of sometimes look at you like, isn't that your job? What are you asking me for?
Right, exactly.
Because they don't.
Needs
they don't.
analysis.
Yeah. I mean, Phil, one of my partners, Phil Brown, is very into that, and he always really pushed it, but it took him a lot of effort, a lot of time. And then we wondered, because we talked about it, we used to talk and say, I spent hours in classes, and and I'm not sure how many really got into it, or how was it worth the effort. And I don't know if it's a cultural thing. I'm curious from like Joe, Kevin, Ann, Catherine, any thoughts on in Japan? Not too long on in Japan, but just what do you think? Joe's leaning in.
any kind of needs analysis, I get responses. I want to watch movies in English, something really, really general like that. I never get anything more specific than that.
Yeah.
And
I want good communication skills. That's one of my favorites.
I had the same thing in Korea
Mm.
with
Ah.
older teenagers that they basically gave me how they wanted to learn, not what they wanted to learn.
Yes. Nice.
I taught a year in China, postgraduates, and that was by far the best students I've ever had, all PhDs. They were getting ready to study graduate school over in the US, and they had come from all over China, but they were there for a year and they knew exactly what they wanted to learn. And if you didn't give it to them, they would come up and tell you to do that. And it was just such a pleasure to do that.
Mm.
yeah, I've tried to do needs analysis, but I've always been kind of flummoxed by the fact that the Japanese students first don't kind of present their opinions very strongly. They don't have anything they really hold on to. And also because I feel like there's things that I discover that then I can show to them. And so if I am constantly, at the end of the term, I like to say, did you like this? What did you think about this? But usually the proof's in the pudding, right? I mean, it's more like, gee, you produce so much more than previous classes, and I've changed these prompts to this or to this sort of thing. Also, I mean, we've been having this conversation in Facebook about problems people have faced, and there's so many more landmines now than there was 10 years ago.
What are you talking about, Joe? There, I'm not with you.
There was an interesting thread about, one person said, well, please, if you could change one thing in the past, what would you want to do? And one student said, well, I would like to go back and make sure my parents don't divorce. And all of a sudden it was like, oh, okay, this is really heavy. This is yada, yada, yada. And it's not this kind of, oh, let's use use these different tenses to show how to, get across these ideas. All of a sudden it's heavy, like, okay, well, sometimes people don't like each other, people grow apart and this sort of thing. And then other people kind of had these sorts of, these experiences of kind of presenting a topic that ended up going, totally in the wrong way. And I mean, needs analysis kind of is more general, but I feel like I'm constantly worrying about what's going to happen in the classroom, that if I make it more, open it up more to people's ideas, then I'm potentially, okay, let's try that. Oh crap, I really wish I hadn't tried that sort of thing. Yeah, I find myself being much more cautious in the classroom in terms of students' kind of emotional fragility.
How does that sound to the outside of Japan people? Does it sound like we're all not willing to take a risk, or I wonder? I can see your face thinking, Bistra.
No, I was just wondering what you guys include in the needs analysis.
Yeah.
Because I have my own that I've come up with.
So is that like a check sheet, or is it, do they have something?
Not really.
No.
They really have to provide information, like specific information about goals. And I was wondering if sometimes students' difficulty in filling a needs analysis comes from the fact that maybe they don't know how to set goals in real life. They just follow, go with the flow. I want to learn English because that's what everybody does. That's what is going to be beneficial for me at some point in my life, but no specific goals really. So I think that's the most difficult part. But for example, in my needs analysis, I also include their choice of teaching method and their choice of corrective feedback. Because some people like to follow the book, other people like to be more spontaneous and just improvise and have conversations and just go wherever the conversation takes them. Some people, are more academic. So I include all this in the needs analysis at the beginning, because I change my approach based on what people expect.
Sometimes when I do a needs analysis, I usually get very general stuff, but then I'll get something very specific and completely irrational. I want to learn 40 words a week, for example. And usually I ask them, do you want me to test you on 40 words a week? And, oh, no, that, and so, yeah, there's the link between the needs analysis and the assessment really needs to be made pretty much at the beginning, that as Andrea pointed out earlier. Yeah. But I want to kind of push back against the idea of measuring effort and giving a grade or an assessment based on effort, because I know in computer, e-learning and things like that, the assessment works. The holy grail is to assess learning, and there's no real good way to assess learning. And so they fall back on effort and with the amount of work that the students do. But I think those are two different things, effort and learning. And I think
this is interesting. I'm just instituting with our part-time teachers. We have this general English. Every first year student on campus must study English in the first year, and they're not in the English department. So there's a huge range, with most of them near the bottom, having failed at studying English for 6 years. So I'm trying to institute in conjunction with these part-time teachers, I'm trying to introduce measuring efforts and gains. And so that idea of, I believe, and I've done this many times with non-English majors, if you make any kind of effort, if you decide you're going to do this listening once a day, or you're going to do 5 minutes writing, you're going to read some graded readers, just they're so broken, or they're so defeated before they even start, that I give them this. I promise you're going to get faster or more interested or something if you make any kind of effort, not to dissect English, not to analyze grammar, but to actually use it through one of the 4 skills. And so I've kind of sold the teachers on that idea. And then the other one is the gains, is actually each teacher pick something, whether it's some kind of output, words per minute, or writing or speaking or speed reading or typing, for that matter, anything that can be kind of counted, and have that as a small part of every lesson. Just by practicing, 80 or 90% of the students will have some kind of gains. I mean, I had a girl speak 4 words a minute. She was speaking 4 words a minute. She spoke 20 words in 5 minutes. She spoke 20 words. And, and I said, good for you. Now we know where you're at. And then, and then she got up to, about 25 words a minute by the end of the term. And she was still well below everybody else, but there was something to praise. Yeah. So I'm kind of dealing with that right now with a whole range of teachers who we have no idea what they do in their classes, but that kind of efforts and gains together I'm trying to approach with. Sorry for talking so long.
Can you do pre-test, post-test with task-based learning?
Ooh. And
in the long term, yes.
And then retest after some time to see how much they have retained.
And so much of the research that they do pre-test and post-test is so short-term that, it kind of makes me wonder. They do talk in the chapter about the difference between research testing and pedagogical testing, of course.
In the presentation course. Oh, sorry. You go ahead. Sorry.
No, nothing. I was just saying that that's not a bad idea, actually, to be used as testing, as an assessment. Do a task before the course and then at the end of the course. as suggests.
Sometimes,
Andrea?
oh, yeah, go ahead,
Yeah.
Andrea. Yeah.
Yeah, I was saying that in the presentation course, which was task-based entirely, we did 4 presentations before. So after each module, because we split it in modules, we did 4. We did 4 presentations before the final presentation. In each of these presentations, we focused either on delivery, content, structure, the assessment criteria. But any presentation, so any pre-course presentation would count as needs analysis. Wouldn't count as assessment. Would count as a placement or a diagnosis test. So it wouldn't be summative, it would be formative.
Although I've had students do pre-tests and they, I basically test out of any kind of, they're so far above the other students that I ask them to be my assistant, for example, or do something special because they've pretty much done or have that level of ability that most students would have by the end.
About that, I remember when I did the CELTA, and this was very interesting. You get assessment every, like a 1-to-1 feedback or some kind of a feedback at the end of each week, if I remember correctly. And I remember the tutor said, if you score maximum A in every category from the beginning, what we're looking at is not necessarily to do things perfectly, but to show progress. So if you score perfectly on each, in every section from the very beginning, there you can't show that you've made progress. There was something of a kind, and I was okay. So I should score less. Yeah. In some sections, so I can show progress. It was a bit tricky. So they always picked up on our weaknesses to see if we made some improvement. I remember that I really hated drilling, pronunciation drills. I couldn't see the point in that. They were like, why? They were very useful for German, in my opinion, but not for English. Not anyway, but maybe because I don't know. Yeah, so high flyers, people who are above level, what do? How do you assess? How can they make progress if everyone else is below level and you cannot, teach them at their level? It's tricky.
Yep.
I had the same thing. I had the non-English majors last year, and the girl that's, was four words a minute was also another girl in the class, was in Australia for a year in high school. And she was, completely fluent. And she wasn't an English major, but she was completely fluent. And I did what Kevin did. She became my assistant, and yet we had the speaking, we had the words per minute speaking stuff. And so she came in on week 1 with, 150 words a minute, and so, yeah, she didn't gain much, but she still participated. Yeah, it's always the lower ones that show the gains, I guess.
Hopefully.
But she wasn't, and she wasn't even so interested in the measurement stuff. She already liked English, and had some confidence and was happy to be the assistant. Nobody tried to compete with her. She was a nice kid, so it was good.
And Anne has put some questions in the chat.
Is assessment comparing students to each other, to a preset standard for the course, or to students themselves at another point in the course?
Deep.
Well, no, all three, right?
No.
But at different times, right?
One thing I do is that ideally, and it's been messed up quite a bit in the past 3 years because of various things, but basically the placement test is going to be the final pass-fail test, because I don't think it's fair to present a brand new test to someone. I always get frustrated and I tell students, take the TOEIC once, just so you know, where to put your pencils on the desk. I mean, there's all these things that you're kind of occupied your mind. You ought to be able to, do it once so you can get it all sorted out. And so the same principle, I do a placement interview that's 3 students talking to each other. And they roll a dice and they get a topic and then they have to, try. And then the final is basically the same thing. And the whole class, the whole speaking class, is presenting them with things to help them pass the test. So, Aizuchi, this process of saying agreement or disagreement, learning how to, ask questions, how to add something to an answer, and then follow-up questions, because a lot of Japanese students, are just like, oh, and you? And, they don't really kind of process the information. So I think definitely a task should be done at the beginning and at the end, primarily so students can see how much they've improved. So that in itself, I guess, is also testing, but there was an interesting line in the chapter that said, testing is primarily supposed to be self-reflection. You do it so you know how much better you're getting. And when you lose that kind of connection, when students aren't interested in seeing how much better they are, then testing kind of falls apart.
And one of the strengths of task-based language assessment is that you can't cheat. It's really hard to cheat on that. And so you can just put that forth at the beginning and at the end and look at their improvement.
Yeah, the class I'm doing now using the on task book that we looked at a few weeks ago, they have to, at the beginning of every unit, they do a 1-minute speech, and then they're meant to redo that 1-minute speech at the end. And then for their final project, they're going to look back on the different topics and make a longer presentation on something they've already done.
Yeah, and that repetition really comes in and helps with the improvement.
Yeah.
I know with widgets, we do what's called a water cooler conversation at the beginning, about 1 or 2 minutes back and forth. And I have them do it on Flipgrid beforehand to practice. So they get a double, double practice.
What's a water cooler conversation, Kevin? Like small talk?
Yeah, small talk, basically.
Okay.
Yeah. Did you have a nice weekend? What's the weather like? Yeah. And
Did
there's
you see Seinfeld last night? That's one of the ones you hear on TV. Yeah.
And a lot of gossip.
Yeah.
No parsnips. Going back to Anne's question, which I find very interesting, actually. Let me read it for people who are watching. Anne, why don't you read it?
She's not a reader. Anne's not a reader. Is assessment? Which one?
Okay. Is assessment comparing students to each other? And that would be, what is it, a norm referenced test? Or to a present standard for the course?
Preset, a preset standard.
Oh, sorry, preset standard.
Yeah.
Yes, like the criterion referenced or the proficiency tests, or to the student themselves at another point in the course. So what do you think? We excluded the norm referenced assessment because it's not acceptable, as Andrea said, it's not acceptable to compare students to one another. And it's always good to have a criteria, to have a preset standard. And then I think if we follow the preset standard, students will inevitably see their progress and will measure themselves against themselves. And that might improve their motivation, actually. Because what they normally do, especially here in Italy, students are very competitive, extremely competitive. Even one point difference results in, turmoil. So they always tend to do that, compare themselves to other students from the class. And I cannot repeat that enough. Guys, compare yourselves to yourselves. Where were you at the beginning of the course? Where are you now? Never compare yourself with another person. So I don't know. What do you think about that?
I often give norms, if it's words per minute, if it's I was just thinking of one a minute ago. Well, whatever it is, reading speeds or these just different kinds of measurable skills. I always take into account how much I know them and whether they're the competitive type group or whether they're the delicate type group. But I'll often say, I said it today, in fact, one girl had a reading speed of 150 words a minute, and she's the top student in the class. And I know she's competitive. And I said, that's good. You've hit the kind of good average of the last few years of classes. But Kokoro, I think you should push yourself to try to get up to about 200. And she took that as a bit of a compliment and a bit of a challenge. And so I always try to go as individual as possible based on what that stretch goals maybe is a term. But I'm definitely in the part 3, students, comparing to themselves at a different point. That's the before after kind of approach.
So it is important to get students to model themselves after near peers and to say, gee, I want to speak like that student instead of I want to speak like this person on television. And I think I've mentioned this to Kevin previously, but when they streamed our classes, I was really dead set against it because I said, you're taking all the best model students and putting them in one class and putting all the weakest students in the bottom class and never see what a good student looks like. And sure enough, I mean, the C class is just a nightmare. Then the A class is just burbling along. And it's like, we really didn't have to do this. But there was this big push from high school teachers asking for streamed classes. So are your classes streamed? And it's just so unfortunate because I think that, and I also think that the better students can learn from these weaker students by saying, gee, I'm doing this, I should do this, I should, helping other students makes all the difference in the world.
I think, go ahead.
I just want to ask, what does a good student and a weak student mean? I mean, are they at a lower level on the CFR, or are they at the same level but perform, lower grades, so to say? What's good, what's weak?
Yeah, I mean, I do. By the time we get them at university, those kind of small differences have kind of slowly stretched out. So then you get these students who seem to just be doing things because of rote. And then other students are saying, oh, okay, I'm going to do this because I know it's valuable. So when I look at them, I see they are students who are better at English, who are better at studying. But because they've had such different high school experiences, they often weren't, I mean, their high school is often very homogeneous. So they weren't exposed to this sort of expanded universe of possibilities. So they are better when I get to them, but I think fundamentally they're roughly the same, and it's just who is more efficient about learning.
Or who has better short-term memory.
Yeah. I'll say, Joe, I had a sort of opposite at the junior high school I'm working at this year. Well, this is the first year we've sort of separated the oral communication class into the more advanced and we call it advanced and sort of standard. And I have the standard set, and I find a lot of sort of the games and activities they actually are enjoying more. I think because they feel like they're actually sort of competing with more of their peers. As there were other things, the level of the other students was so much higher. They thought they didn't want to, they couldn't keep up. And then the other students who were sort of frustrated, they would want to do more and they were being maybe held back. Like I said, we're only a few months into this thing, but so far my students have enjoyed it.
I think context is a really important thing there, because at junior high school, I had 40 students come in the first year of junior high school, and 20 of them were starting English from that first day. And the other 20 had been studying English for 6 years in our elementary school with me and another teacher. So it was kind of the haves and the have-nots in terms of experience. But we told them that by the end of the first or the second year, they were all going to be mixed together, but it was giving them a chance to catch up, which most of them do once, because the range is not, the expectations are not so high. It's basically get to past tense, by the second year. So I think that's a really good example. By university, they've all had a similar set of experiences. So
this is a really lousy metaphor, but do you know the movie Leon, where the assassin teaches the little girl how to kill people, and he starts out with a sniper rifle, and then gradually teaches her to use a pistol or something else. And he said the rule is that you start very far away, and that's the easiest to do. And as you get closer, it's more difficult. And of course, the most difficult, of course, is with a knife, because you have to be right there next to the person to kill them. This is a bad metaphor, but
Kevin's lost it.
Assessment though, you've got this, big like TOEIC tests, and those are far away. And the program tests, and you're getting a little bit closer, and then the teacher tests, and finally the peer tests, peer assessment, really. And then finally, the self-assessment, which I think is the most pure, the best kind of assessment you can do and encourage. And if you get the students to self-assess, then you've got it nailed.
I'm sorry, the Penny Ur has a great presentation she did with us a few years ago, and talking about two quick points, talking about the peer assessment, that they did surveys with 1,000 students in Israel, and it was overwhelmingly that students hate peer assessment. And then the other point I want to make is I'm in my course in October studying John Hattie's Visible Learning. The second highest impact on learning is self-assessment. And that's where students' own self-expectations tied in with self-assessment has the biggest impact on learning. So I'm wondering, do you guys, anybody want to have a fight in our last 15 minutes on the value of peer assessment, or the anybody on that side?
Sniper rifles.
Yeah, sniper rifle or knife. Yeah.
I think as long as there are clear checklists, that would be beneficial. But if they just have to assess, subjectively, then that's what causes the problem, I think.
Agreed. Yeah.
For me, peer assessment is a sign that the class is going well. So usually it starts off and they're very hesitant to look at other students' writing. And this is primarily for writing. I don't do it for speaking because I think it's too hard for them to evaluate on the fly. But writing, they can look. And then when I get them to be saying, oh, I really enjoyed reading this person's ideas, or that seems like, as they move into a mode of peer assessment, I'm being successful with my teaching. So it's not that I want to kind of fight against peer assessment. I think that you should sort of set it up so that it comes about naturally and they kind of realize that the other students have something valuable to say.
And that's all based on trust. Everything you just said.
Exactly.
Yeah, trust. Yeah.
Exactly. That's why one of the primary goals of a teacher is to establish good rapport and a learning environment where people are not afraid to assess and self-assess and peer assess.
And laugh. Right?
And laugh.
To enjoy
and
and
laugh.
laugh.
Yeah. Be willing to make mistakes and learn from them.
I think there are some problems associated with both peer assessment and self-assessment. I think you've heard of the Dunning-Kruger effect. That's the biggest issue with self-assessment. And that needs to be managed right at the beginning of the course. With peer assessment, like you said, it's about, we're all here setting, like Anne, I think, said in the chat, it's the right atmosphere. They don't have to feel as judges. They're just giving their opinion. So they're not really assessing. They're giving feedback, if you put it that way. And 360 assessment, and 360 degrees feedback is something very common. It's one of the most effective ways to give feedback in companies, in schools, everywhere. I mean, it's 360 degrees. And what I also noticed is that when their peers give them grades higher than they should, it's a sign that they themselves don't understand the requirements and are not at the right level. So we need to reset the criteria or re-explain or reassess the assessment, the assessment criteria, if you know what I mean. So if they're close, if their grades or whatever they have to do are close to yours, if their feedback is kind of in line with yours and with the self-assessment, that's a good sign. But if, for example, let's say that for the sake of, it's easier, for the sake of the argument, you give them points 1 to 5, 1 is minimum, 5 is maximum, and somebody performs a task and they rate themselves as a 3, you give them a 5, their colleagues give them a 2. It's obvious that they don't understand the task and the assessment criteria, and if they don't understand the assessment criteria, it's not clear what they have to do. And you have to reevaluate everything. And I've had this situation once. So I think it's a good sign. It's a kind of a formative assessment for the entire class. You get the pulse. Do they know what they're supposed to do? They understand the task, the requirements? Do they know what they have to do? Sometimes they don't. They think that good, performing a task well means using 4 idioms and 3 collocations. And wow, just like they do in Cambridge exams, when you train them like puppies, you have to use 3 idioms, passive voice, 2 conditionals, and 3 collocations, and you'll get a good grade in a Cambridge or IELTS or whatever. So I strongly believe that 360 degrees feedback and assessment for learning is the way to go. It's the only one that gives you the overall picture. You know what's happening. You kind of read their minds in a way, which is great.
So I'm not familiar with 360. Does that mean peer and teacher and self?
Self, yep.
Self,
yep. Okay. Peer, teacher, self. And if you want to spice things up, you can ask someone from the outside to come. So that you can also bring someone who hasn't seen them, who just sees the picture, not the video, the progress they've made, everything. Totally objective. We do that in all our tests. We've got a second examiner, so to say, and they're the ones who grade them based on the very objective assessment criteria. And then the trainer comes in and readjusts based on the progress they've made. So that's also nice. It's difficult, but it's interesting. You see yourself as pretty good, then comes another teacher who says, you're not that good. Your teacher says you're brilliant. Your peers don't think you're brilliant. So it kind of raises lots of questions, and it has to be qualitative. So they have to give you like written feedback. I liked this because I didn't like this because just numbers don't really help unless the assessment criteria are really clear. That's all for me.
Great, thanks, Andrea. I'm learning a lot. Never thought
I'm
of it this way.
wondering, I'm wondering what Kevin's gonna do with this giant gap in his life next Wednesday.
I'm gonna go traveling actually pretty soon.
That's
Getting
What are
ready.
you doing?
Yeah, gonna go to the States. Go camping with my brother in Colorado.
Wow.
Nice.
Wow.
Yeah.
Are the flights very cheap at this
No,
point?
they're about the same price as they
About
were
the same.
before. Yeah.
Wow.
So, yeah. But I will continue. There are 4 more units in the book.
Yes, I saw.
And no, I was a Boy Scout, and this is another metaphor here. I was a Boy Scout, and I got all the way up to Life Scout, which is next to Eagle, very close to Eagle, and I was four merit badges short. You have to get 21, and I only needed 4 more. And then I discovered girls, and that's all she wrote. I never got my Eagle Scout, and I regret it.
Just for girls?
I regret it. Yes, because it's all their fault, girls. Yeah. But I do regret that. And, 4 merit badges I was short, and you guys are short only 4 chapters. I'll keep posting the weekly thing each of the weeks, and the forums are open. And so you're welcome to do that as well. And I really hope you just keep continuing at the same pace, because that's easy. You've got momentum going. And the last 4 are kind of more overviews anyway, because they rehash the materials from a different perspective again. And so they're relatively easy, and a good way to finish up the book.
And speaking of which, we don't have to deal with it now, but I told you last week that there was a call for us to anyone or 2 people that might be interested in writing a review, 1,000 to 1,200 words on this particular book we're doing. And maybe we'll put that in Barb's email that goes out to everybody. But think about it. And if you're interested, it's a great idea. And in fact, the deadline would be this coming January. Okay, so there's a big long, and it would come out in June of next year. The current book the current magazine they're working on is already full, so it'd be due in January for June. I got another message for him today. There's another task-based learning book out that I can't even remember, but they had a call out for it and nobody responded. So I'm just, if I can see it in the next 2 seconds, I'll tell you what the title was. And if not, I'll shut up. It's just been a hard thing today. I've had trouble shutting up. There it is. Interaction feedback and task research in second language learning. I'll just put I'll put it into the chat here in our group.
Okay. Who's the author?
So I'm just looking here. It's Allison
Is it Robin?
McKay.
Ooh,
Allison
that looks
McKay.
nice.
Isn't it Mackie?
Oh, Mackie, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the Nova Scotian in me trying to say McKay. Yeah. So that's the other book, this Our Red book and this book that they're looking for. That's a couple of easy publications, if that means anything to you, to have some publications in this Jolt journal's quite it's quite respected.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
I think we have at least one person interested. So if we get a second for this book that we're using, that would be really nice. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I think Kevin, you're welcome to join as well. I mean, just
right.
As a first or second. Yeah.
I'm also interested in, I want to kind of create an FAQ or just a kind of a very simple treatment of task-based language teaching to, if I teach this course again, I want to make it easier. I think it's too difficult, really. And to have a kind of a thing to go along with it to help out. So if you have any FAQs, please send them to me. And I might be able to include those in the next course.
Well, we're actually, Barb will send out a survey, right, that you took a look at, Kevin.
That's
And we
right.
have a section at the end, but it's there's just a basic ITDI survey on the book and the course and everything, and there's space there for you to give any kind of feedback, which would be great.
I think at this point, sorry, go ahead.
Just skip chapter 3 and 4.
Yeah.
No, or what was it? 2 and 3.
Yeah. 2 and 3,
Just,
right.
just send people a summary and let them move on to the practical stuff.
Yeah.
For teachers anyway. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to stop recording here. That finishes it off. There we go. Oh, yeah.